And welcome to our May edition of Sports Highlights. Our program airs on Mondays at 7, 2, and 7, weekends at 9 a.m. on Cox Cable 47, 517, always on demand on YouTube, as well as NNPS-TV.com, our monthly interview show since February of 1992. Greg Bickaveris, glad you're with us. Our featured guests for this month will be Scott Woodlief and Rick Platt. Let's start off with Scott Woodlief, the head football coach at Heritage High School, just finished his first season. Good to see you, Scott.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And you have a long-time roots. You went to Kickingham High School.
Yes, I sure did.
How have things changed since when you were a player at Kickingham? You've also coached at Kickingham, coached at Gloucester, now here at Heritage, and you had a stint up in Northern Virginia. How has it been from the peninsula, even from the time you were coaching at Gloucester and Kickingham before?
Well, I mean, things have kind of changed. You know, the kids have changed. Football in the 90s was a little different than football, in 2020. Mm-hmm. And I would just say I consider that kind of old school football in the 90s. And now the kids these days, there's a whole lot more that's out there to make them bigger, faster, and stronger back when it was in the 90s. I mean, now you have personal trainers, you have a lot of different types of equipment you can use to be able to help them. Northern Virginia, it's a little different, with just the culture of the kids there. Being a bigger area, the kids and kind of where they live, it's really, really kind of fast there. So that's kind of the difference I feel.
Yeah, when you were playing for Kickingham, you went up against Kaz at Bethel, and Coach Trainham at Phoebus. And, of course, you had Howard Jackson when you were there, and Mike Smith. And Mike Smith is still around. Who would have thought? Would you have thought in the fall of '81 as a senior that he'd still be coaching in 2021?
I would. If you would have asked me that question, I would probably have said no in being a player in high school. But me, being a player and now being a coach in the Peninsula District and just, being around Coach Smith and knowing kind of who he is and what he stands for, he's our icon here in Hampton, Virginia. And, he's kind of put us on the map. He's got a lot of recognition to, the football programs in this area by the special things he's done for us. And I'm just glad to see him still out there.
Yeah.
And, and I want him to continue doing what he's doing. I mean, he impacts kids' lives every day. And, he impacted my life in the 70s, and he's still impacting my life today.
Absolutely. Of course, the Hampton-Bethel event, folks, was an event. I mean, in '74, Bethel won the state championship in Kaz's first year. '75, Hampton won. '76, Bethel won. '77, Hampton won. So back then, I mean, it was all about Hampton and Bethel. You experienced it before you went to Hampton, before you went to Kickingham. It really was an event. And all your games against Hampton and Bethel and Phoebus when you played were events.
There was. I mean, I remember back, when Darwin Stadium had Thorpe behind it. The fence was probably 4 or 5 feet from the corner of the end zone, and standing room only. You had people standing on the fence. It was a thing to be at on Friday night. You wanted to go to a football game in Hampton, Virginia, when somebody was playing on Friday night.
Right, especially against Hampton, Bethel, and Phoebus. And then in Newport News, we went up against Coach Baycoat at Ferguson and Thad Madden at Warwick High School. And then you coached with Coach Kaz and Coach Baycoat. Mm-hmm. Coach Baycoat's passed away at the apprentice school.
Yeah, I mean, when you're able to sit down with them guys and be able to just kind of, talk to them and ask them questions and be able to get, where they've been, their experiences really helped to instill me the coach I am today. Just like I said, I'm a kind of an old school coach that has changed with the times. Mm-hmm. So, and Coach Baycoat and Coach Kaz, they were them type of guys that would say, that kids are going to change, and you need to be able to change with them, but still have your beliefs in who you are and believe in yourself.
And some of that discipline came from your former coach, Howard Jackson, that as we get older, we start developing some of the habits from our parents and our mentors. He was a very strict disciplinarian, but he always had the best interest in mind for his kids.
Yes, Coach Jackson was, he was probably the hardest coach I had ever played up underneath. You know, he wasn't about any playfulness. He always held you accountable. He wanted you to be where you needed to be. We started practice out running 40-yard sprints. You know, back in that time, you know, weights weren't a big thing. You know, it was more or less get out, run a lot, keep yourself in physical shape, and then compete on Friday night. And whoever was the better team was the better team.
We don't have to go into a whole lot of detail, but there wasn't a whole lot of water breaks back then either. And it was more about physical fitness, like you said.
It was. And, you know, I remember Coach Jackson used to go out at 5 o'clock in the morning and get them metal pails with the funnels and the little scoop that you see. And he would put salt in the bottom of the pail. And we would practice at 7 o'clock, and our first water break was probably at 7:45, 8 o'clock. So that heat was hitting on the metal buckets, and he would stir it up, say, Coach Paul, stir it up for him. Mm-hmm. And then he would give you a scoop, and then he would tell him either to give you a full scoop or a half scoop. So it all depends on kind of how your practice was going, if he would give you a full scoop. But at the very end of it, he would always give you some salt to be able to get the stuff back into your body, and so you wouldn't cramp up and do things like that.
Right, and of course we're talking to Scott Woodleif. He's referring to Johnny Pauls, who also was a Kecoughtan coach as well for a long time. Was it tough because your school was always perceived as an excellent baseball and soccer school, while Hampton and Bethel usually made the postseason every year because not a whole lot of teams made it? Was that tough because you grew up with a lot of those Hampton and Bethel kids and Phoebus kids back then? Well,
you know, I went to junior high school at Lindsay. And then I went over to Hampton High School and played JV football there, and then got moved up to the varsity because back in the 70s and 80s, you didn't play varsity. You know, you played your JV season, and then you got moved up if they ended up going to the playoffs. And you know, it was just rivalries there. You know, you didn't want to lose to the team down the street. You didn't want to lose to Hampton. And, you know, you wanted, you know, and they expected to beat every Newport News team.
Mm-hmm. Right. Of course, Hampton, Bethel, and Phoebus and Kecoughtan were great rivalries like Ferguson, Menchville, Warwick, and Denby. Talk about your playing career, because in '93, we televised a Poseidon's game that the late John Quillen was coaching, and you said you played in that game.
I played
for
7, 8 years in semi-pro football. Mm-hmm. I played with the Norfolk Neptunes. I played with the Peninsula Pirates. That was when Frank Johnson was the coach, which he was my JV coach at Hampton High School at that time. And then I ended up playing with the Poseidons with Coach Quillen, playing over here at Todd Stadium, you know, going over here into Richmond. And, you know, I just held on to the dream. But, you know, when you get an age, you finally figure out, you know, your time's up. And I was fortunate to be able to have Coach Newsom, you know, as a role model to me, which brought me on at Kecoughtan High School and started my coaching career, which was very special. And then I ended up being able to coach with Coach Quillen. Mm-hmm. So playing for someone and then coaching with them, you'd be able to see really how much they care about kids, and they've helped me a whole lot in my life.
And Coach Newsom head coach at Kecoughtan and Heritage, also an assistant at Virginia Tech. His Heritage team was so good, but they still did not make the playoffs. That shows you now it's watered down compared to when you were in school. Well,
you know, it's you either won the district and you went on, and everybody else put their equipment up. You know, it's not like it is now where you have 5A, 3A, 2A, and and you know, some schools, you know, play 500 football and they go to the playoffs. It was either win the district or go home.
Right. Absolutely. Now, talk about this past Heritage team. This was not the normal year. There was no football in the fall of 20. This is all spring of 21. The good thing was 20's behind us. The fall of 21's ahead of us. But you were literally getting your staff and your players literally at the last minute. It was not easy. You didn't even know all the names until probably the second game of the season.
I tell you, this season was probably one of the toughest seasons that I've had. You know, I came on. I got the job late. Showed up. We were able to do some conditioning. I had four sessions with the kids. And then they canceled that. And then they ended up saying we were going to have a season. And then the next thing I know, the season was here. You know, we had, I think it was 2 weeks to be able to be prepared. 3 practices outside. The rest of them were inside a gym because of the weather. I can honestly say that the first game, I told the kids to take the tape of their last names off their helmet because we were still learning their names. And, you know, but, you know, you learn a lot, you know, great school, you know, great faculty, great administration, great athletic director. I'm very fortunate to be at Heritage High School right now.
Right. The best years are ahead of you, and they've won the state championship. You can draw back on that way back in 2000. Not many Newport News schools have because they've been under the shadow of Hampton, Bethel, and Phoebus.
Right.
So you're trying to change that tradition.
Well, I mean, you know, change the cultures, you know, was kind of my saying this year to our staff. You know, we want to change the culture here at Heritage. You know, we want to be able to get Heritage back on track to where they've been. You know, there's a lot of people that live in Newport News that remember heritage of the past, and I want them to be able to remember heritage of the future. Mm-hmm. And I think we have a good nucleus of kids, and I think, you know, starting next week we'll be able to start, you know, strength and conditioning and being able to lift and get outside. So I'm really anxious to be able to start that and get the kids back in there and hopefully start lifting weights. They haven't done nothing in a year, so. Mm-hmm. It's been really hard for us. Almost
like when you were in high school, you didn't lift weights back then. But is this spring season that we just had going to help the fall, or is it too close of a gap?
Well, you know, I think it's going to help. You know, I would like to see. You know, I took the 5 games as a spring season, mm-hmm. and you know, being able to learn our kids, being able to, you know, just learn the system overall, being able to see what you have. Being able to have kids compete, which is really, really special for them, and it was just good to be able to see the seniors, you know, get something out of this COVID thing, mm-hmm. and I'm just hoping that, you know, we can build on it this summer.
Well, Scott, all the best to you in the fall of 21. All the best to you and your family, and congratulations, and look forward to year number 2 as Heritage head coach.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Scott Woodleif, our first guest in our May 21 show of Sports Highlights. He's had a strong lineage here on the peninsula, played for Kickintan, the late Howard Jackson, also was the head coach at Kickintan, also at Gloucester, Heritage, and several schools in Northern Virginia. Sports Highlights will continue after these messages.
You're watching NNPS-TV. Catch sports highlights on Mondays at 7, 2, and 7, and on Saturdays and Sundays at 9 a.m. Visit us online at nnpstv.com to view all your favorite episodes. NNPS-TV, watching education happen.
Fusion Fitness with Alexis. Tune in weekdays 6:30 a.m., Mondays 7:30 a.m., 2:30 p.m., and 7:30 p.m.
And welcome back to our second segment of our May 21 edition of Sports Highlights. Since February of 1992, Communicator Awards honored by the Newport News City Council as well. Greg Picaveras, glad you're with us and our entire crew here. Hope you enjoyed our first guest, Scott Woodleif, the head football coach at Heritage High School. Now we turn gears to running and talk to Rick Platt, the president of the Colonial Roadrunners. Rick, good to see you.
Thank you.
How did you get involved in running in the first place?
An English teacher at my high school was a great coach. His name was Ayers, and he instilled in me the love of running, and I still have it about 55 years later.
Yeah, and how do you sustain that long? Because some people might keep a hobby for a few years and move on. This has been a big part of your life.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm lucky enough to be healthy. I have certain training techniques to keep me healthy. So with few exceptions, I run every day. I had a streak of 4+ years. It ended in January. I had a hip flexor injury that became worse. And so basically I run every day if I can.
And you've been honored in the Hall of Fame too, correct?
Yes, second year of the Hall of Fame, I made the Virginia Peninsula Road Racing Hall of Fame.
Very nice. When you talk about the Colonial Roadrunners, you think Williamsburg, but talk about the entire concept of the Colonial Roadrunners.
Well, we're more than just Williamsburg. We're largely a regional club. Peninsula also has a Peninsula Track Club, and we work hand in hand with the Peninsula Track Club. So Colonial Roadrunners started in 1981. I didn't become involved until about 5 years later, so I did not start the club. Some people erroneously think that. I've been president of the club since 1994 and do all the results, stats, and things like that. So I'm the driving force behind the club.
One thing about Williamsburg, there's plenty of great places to walk and run both.
Correct.
So what do you like the most about it?
Well, the parks and the trails. I run trails mostly. That's one thing that keeps me healthy. So most of my running is on the Lake Matoka trails around William and Mary, and I did graduate from William and Mary, or the Green Springs Trail near Jamestown High School, or the War Hill Nature Trail up past Lafayette High School.
Yeah, so many great places to run. And you talk about trails. A lot of times people might run on the street or on the pavement or on the track around their school. But trails, you never know if there's going to be a route. You've got to always be, I'm sure you can tell stories about that. I've
taken a few spills, but I still like to run on trails, and it's worth the risk of falling once in a while. But if you pay attention and focus, you're not going to fall.
Talk about some of the events that you've ran in that have been highlighted, and also age group events are very specific as well.
Races that I've run?
Yes.
Well, the highlight of my life was the 1977 Marine Corps Marathon. I ran a 2:23:55, and that was within 2 minutes of the Olympic trials qualifying time 2 years later, which I attempted to do, but I ran through an injury and paid the price.
What kind of injury did you have?
That was a calf strain where the Achilles attaches to the calf.
Right. So much about running is the before and after. You just can't show up. You do a lot of stretching because ligaments are an issue. Like you said, calves are an issue as well. But a lot of times it's the preparation before you run the marathon, correct?
I'm sorry?
As far as the preparation before you run the marathon.
Oh, well, yeah. At that time I was running 90 to 100 miles a week, and I was training. I had graduated from William Mary, but I trained with the William Mary cross-country team. And that was a key part of me being in good shape to run that time.
And you worked there hand in hand with the late John Randolph, too, as well.
Actually, John Randolph was my coach when I was a freshman at William and Mary. Then he hired an assistant, Baxter Berryhill. Baxter was the distance coach, so I give him credit somewhat for my marathon success that he helped coach me there.
And John Randolph was a visionary. He was the athletic director at William and Mary as well.
For many years, a great guy.
Yes, he was.
I enjoyed working with him, and I started writing track and cross-country articles for William and Mary in 1976. So I interviewed John Randolph and the other coaches for many articles in the Virginia Gazette.
And when you talk about running, there's not a whole lot of equipment. You need good tennis shoes, of course, and light clothing. Do you run year-round? And what has changed the most from running from all the different decades you've run in?
Shoes have improved, but some of my favorite shoes are way back when, and they discontinue. Whatever shoe you like, they'll discontinue it, and then you have to find another shoe. And that was a problem for me. I wore Saucony shoes for many years, and there's something called heel-to-toe differential, where if it's higher up, it's 12 millimeters. The minimalist phase had many of those shoes down to 0 and 4 millimeters, and that strained my calf. So I need to find shoes that are 12 millimeter heel-to-toe differential. Currently, I'm training in Brooks.
Those are very good. And we're talking to Rick Platt, the president of the Colonial Roadrunners, and of course a regional type event type place. What do you do now as far as running to inspire others to run in your club? I mean, what do you talk about as far as running and the goals for the club each year?
Well, our club is all-inclusive. We do everything from the fastest, and we have world-class runners in our club, to casual strollers and walkers. So every one of our events has a walk-in division as well as age groups from 14 and under to 70 and over. We currently will probably have 24, 25 Colonial Roadrunner Grand Prix races this year, but we also just lately has really become strong with group runs. So currently we have group runs every Wednesday and Thursday. We're going to shortly have them on Tuesdays, and the original big group run was a Dog Street Pub running club group runs on Mondays. We expect that to come back maybe later this spring. So people who can run Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday with fellow runners, and then there's Saturday long runs. So, and now we also have a Sunday run where we rotate 4 different locations in Williamsburg: Billsburg Craft Brewery, Virginia Beer Company Craft Brewery, Precarious Beer Hall on Merchant Square, and then the Spoken Art location. That's a bicycle type rest area on the Capitol Trail.
Right, and I walk a lot on Duke of Gloucester Street, and I see a lot of runners out there as well.
Yes.
Scenic place to run.
Well, it's when we started the Run the Dog Street Challenge in 2010, we call it the most historic street in Williamsburg, in the nation, and that was a quote from Rockefeller, who founded or helped fund Williamsburg.
Very nice. Talking to Rick Platt. He's the president of the Colonial Roadrunners. Greg Bickavaris, glad you're with us at Greg Bick on Twitter and YouTube. Go to the YouTube page, type in NNPS Telecom to watch archived events. We did a total of 11 football games this past spring. Myself, Ray Price, Carl Daniels, and Nate Milton, and our wonderful alumni crew of students as well. Talk about the difference between the marathons, the half marathon and the full marathon. I know obviously it's mileage difference, but talk about the preparation involved.
Well, the marathon has a mystique, and everybody says, I want to run a marathon. And I ran 3 marathons in my younger days. My legs couldn't handle marathons anymore, but I can do half marathons. So in terms of pride and all that, you want to run a marathon because that's what everybody does. And that started in Greece when Philippides ran and collapsed in Athens and said, "Rejoice, we conquer." That's a legendary story. And but half marathons are more healthy. I'm not going to discourage anybody from running marathons, but generally you have to do a lot more preparation for running marathons than you do a half marathon.
Right, and you talk about marathons, like you said, there's women, men. When you think of marathons over the years that were televised, the New York City Marathon, the Boston Marathon, but talk about Newport News. They've had a one city marathon. Your thoughts on how that's evolved? I know COVID kind of interrupted it for a couple of years.
Yeah, I've only the highest regard for the Newport News One City Marathon. And Jason Todd with Flat Out Events is now the race manager or race director, and he does a fine job. And of course, it was the second to last weekend of running events in 2020. They lucked out to get the race in just before COVID hit. And then this year it was virtual only. I feel confident it's going to be back into being a real event next year. But I do the 8K every year. It's a fun event from start to finish.
What advice would you give to somebody that wants to take up running, whether as a kid going to high school or a senior citizen?
For which of the events, or any of them?
Any of them, yeah.
Well, start slow. And I'm a fan of running on soft surface. I run trails. But a lot of people don't mind that. If you have well-cushioned shoes, you can run on your neighborhood streets and all that. Running on a track is okay, especially if it's a soft surface track. So allow enough time for preparation. That's a key thing. Many people want to try something too quickly, and there's a saying, too much, too soon, too fast leads to injury. And of course, I'm the worst example of that. I swam for William & Mary my sophomore year, and at the end of the William & Mary swimming season in February, I said, hey, I'm going to run the Boston Marathon. I trained for literally 7 weeks for the Boston Marathon. So that's an example of do what I say, not what I do. But I was only 19 years old and foolish.
Right, and I think swimming and walking help running as well.
Oh, without a doubt. I was in great aerobic shape, so that had my base. I was a distance freestyler and a distance butterflyer. So it wasn't that hard of a transition. Just get your legs from the swimming legs to the running legs.
Right, and of course, it's something like you have to do on a regular basis to stay in shape, because running is good for you physically, mentally, emotionally. I guess a lot of times you can burn off a lot of steam running because it's such a great cardio sport.
Without a doubt. It's a relaxation, it's meditation, but it's also thinking time. I write the Virginia Gazette articles. Many times I compose the article in my brain as I'm running. And if I'm designing a new running course or something like that for one of our races, it's all done while I'm running. So it's a great time for yourself. Talking
to Rick Platt, he's the president of the Colonial Roadrunners, the black and orange outfit there. Rick, I guess you have to tell some of your fellow runners still, about evolving running at night to wear light colored clothes. You hear about bicyclists always getting hit by cars, unfortunately. Do you tell to them about safety and protocol when you're running at night? Yes, and if you're running at night, you should wear reflectorized vests. And we do have our group runs. They run the Dog Street, or the Dog Street Pub group runs
They're held at 6 p.m. all year long. So once November hits in the dark and you see all the people with their headlights, their arm lights that are bouncing up and down, it's a very sort of artistic looking thing to see all the runners bouncing up and down on Dark Street.
Yeah, and for the novice out there, running is a good way to lose some weight too, right?
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Well, we have some very successful stories. A gentleman just joined our club the past few weeks. He's lost 85 pounds, and he's running sub 8-minute pace for his races, which is amazing because he still weighs 215 pounds, but he weighed 300 plus pounds. And through running and diet, of course, nutrition, he's lost 85.
Yeah, running, walking, swimming, bicycling, 4 sports. Pretty much you can do on your own. You don't need a whole group team. I guess the biggest thing sometimes during the winter, and we're now in May, is to motivate yourself, right?
Just get yourself out the door. Many times I haven't felt like really running too far, and I say, get out the door. You say, I'll just run a mile or 2. You end up doing a 10-mile workout or something like that. So get out the door is the key thing. And wear sufficient clothes. And it's good to wear an extra layer that maybe if you're going to somewhere and running a little bit, you wear your extra hooded sweatshirt, and then you get warmed up and you can take it off.
Yeah, you see that a lot during marathons where sweatshirts are just left on the road.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're sweating so much.
Right, and they donate them all to charity. There's truckloads of clothes there at any of the major marathons, New York, Boston, et cetera.
Right, and the key is also stay hydrated, like you said.
That's part of health to me, is I thoroughly hydrate every day before I go running, and then I thoroughly hydrate afterwards. And that's not only good for the run, but it's also good for your kidneys, your intestines, and your health.
Absolutely. Rick Platt, thank you for joining us, President of the Colonial Road Runners. All the best to you and your club in the future as 2021 evolves.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Hope you enjoyed our guest today for our May 21 edition, our spring edition right here on Sports Highlights. I want to thank our entire crew. I want to thank our guest once again, Scott Woodleif, head football coach at Heritage High School, as well as Rick Platt, the president of the Colonial Road Runners, as well, a very successful organization. For Ray Price, I'm Greg Nicoderis. Thanks for watching our May show. Don't forget, NewportNewsGreekFestival.org, and we'll talk to you soon.